Greetings, Earthlings, and welcome back to Watchcastage. Over the last year or two, there have been countless rave reviews about the Tissot PRX, and I bought into the hype. I picked up the 40mm version, and I thought I was going to love it. Turns out I didn't love it. I just thought it was too big for my wrist, so I went ahead and picked up the 35mm version, and that's what this video is. My wearing experience with the Tissot PRX 35mm silver dial. And to preemptively respond to all of the comments I will get, yes, I now have ovaries because I am wearing a small watch, and I absolutely believe that you should continue to judge your own manliness as well as others' manliness based on the size of the jewelry that they're wearing on their wrist. Comes across super secure, guys. Keep it up. Now, to get a good feel for the PRX, I have tried 3 different models. The first is the blue 40mm quartz. This came on the metal bracelet, but I switched it out for the leather strap. The second model I tried is the Powermatic 80, again, 40mm and blue. I thought this was a bit too big. We'll discuss all of that a bit later. And the last version that I picked up is the silver dial 35mm quartz. Now, because this video is about the 35mm version, I'll only share those measurements. The case diameter comes in at around 35.5mm. The lug-to-lug, if we include the protruding end links, comes in at 44.6mm. The thickness is only 9.6mm, so very nice. And the weight on this, when it's sized up for my 6.5-inch wrist, comes in at 94 grams. Here is a quick wrist shot of the 35mm version on my 6.5-inch wrist. Fits very nicely. It does look a bit small based on modern standards, but I think it looks quite nice. I'll go ahead and rotate around so you can see how it sits on the wrist. Very thin. Rotating around, you can see some really nice shine on the bracelet. Very nice there. Rotating back around, another side profile shot. And then rotating, and there is the front of the watch. Here it is, a little bit closer in case you want to see that. A very good looking watch on my wrist, I'd say. Now, for comparison's sake, here is how the 40mm Powermatic 80 fits on my wrist. I think because of those protruding end links, it fits just a bit too large on my wrist, and I found some quite annoying gaps right at the ends of the bracelet, so it's not my favorite thing. And in case you want to see the 40mm a little bit closer, here you go. Much larger bracelet when it meets the case, but the dial on this is just insane. It looks so good, and that's why I picked up the Powermatic 80, because the dial is just amazing looking. All right, now it's size comparison time. We have the 35mm PRX and the 40mm PRX. Here is the 35mm compared to a 37mm Seiko 5 field watch. This is a really popular watch, so I imagine this will be a useful comparison for a lot of people. Let's go to another incredibly popular watch, and that would be the Hamilton Khaki Field Mechanical. There is a size comparison between the 35mm PRX and the Khaki Field Mechanical. Let's keep going. Then we have another Seiko. We have a Seiko 5 dive watch, which, if I am not mistaken, is 42mm. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm probably wrong. Another very popular watch, useful comparison. Let's go. We will do now a very unuseful comparison. A G-Shock 5600. So it's going to be a very different sized watch, but just because a lot of people have it, there you go. That is the 35mm versus the G-Shock. And the last comparison we have is the 35mm PRX versus the Tudor Black Bay 58. 35 versus 39. Now let's talk about what I enjoyed about the 35mm PRX as I've been wearing it over the last couple of weeks. First and foremost is the comfort. The bracelet on this thing is absolutely insane. That is what people talk about with the PRX. The bracelet is way too good for the price you're paying. I agree with them. It is one of the most comfortable bracelets I have ever worn. The 35mm version also has much smaller links, so it's able to form to your wrist really nicely. The links are also quite thin, but they don't feel flimsy, and on the note of thinness, The 35 millimeter is only 9.6 millimeters thick, so it is just an incredibly comfortable watch on the wrist, and that was the thing that made me really kind of fall in love with it. I put it on and it was just almost better than any other watch I've worn. I also really enjoyed the date on this watch. Nothing in particular, just the fact that it has a date. That's a really useful complication to me. I use it every single day. I wish most of my watches had a date. This has a date, and I liked that. Something else that I liked is that the seconds hand hits every single marker. That's something that's a bit rare with quartz watches, but this is great. And since I'm already zoomed in on the dial, there is very minimal dial text, and I think it is very balanced and nice looking. It's not too cluttered. There are not books on the dial. Very well designed dial. I also enjoyed how versatile this watch is. I think it looks great with casual attire like a hoodie or just jeans and a t-shirt, but if you need to go into the office and wear a button-up or a nice jacket, I think it looks great in that environment as well. And on the note of casual, the thing that really sold me on this, the silver dial with the gold hands, it just gives me summertime vibes. And we are in the dead of winter. It is freezing cold. I go for walks and it's sub-freezing. Having something that reminds me of the summer is really nice right now. And that's what it gives me. Vibes for summer. And that's what I've really loved about it. But then we get to what I didn't like about the watch while I was wearing it. And with the silver dial and the gold hands, I found it quite difficult to read in certain lighting. I think this model is the best looking 35 millimeter, but it is just difficult to read in certain light. Speaking of difficult to read in certain light, here is the lume on the PRX. The hands have the majority of the lume, and then there are tiny, tiny, tiny slivers on the hour markers. Once I take away the UV light, it fades very quickly. It is difficult to read. It is not great in the nighttime or in certain daylights if you have this specific dial. I also disliked that the bracelet doesn't offer any form of micro adjustment. The best we get is a couple of half links. On the 35 millimeter, I think it's easy to get by because it is so light. You can wear it a little bit looser, but when we get to the 40 millimeter version, I found this to be much larger of an issue because the top is so much heavier. If you wear it loose, it just slides around and feels very, very heavy on the wrist and very cumbersome. With the 35 millimeter, I wish it did have micro adjust, but you can get by without it. And the final thing that I disliked about this watch while I was wearing it is actually something that I also loved about it, the sizing. Most of the time, I thought it was perfectly fine. I thought, yes, it is a little bit small, but it works great. Other times, I looked down and I thought, oh my gosh, this watch is just too small. I went back and forth with that dilemma in my brain over and over and over the last couple of weeks. I think it works great, but sometimes I look down and think, oh, geez, that's too small. That's what, hopefully that's not what he said. Did I just make a dick joke on this channel? This channel was going so well. So in conclusion, I bought the 40 millimeter version of this watch over a year ago thinking I was going to love it, but due to the size and the extension of those protruding end links, I ended up not enjoying it. Then a year passes and I buy the 35 millimeter on a whim, thinking it's going to be too small and I'm going to hate it and I'm going to return it. But I put it on and I thought, this might actually work. I did go back and forth thinking it's too small, it's just right, it's too small, it's just right, but because it is so versatile, I can go from wearing it casually and wearing it in the office, and with how incredibly comfortable it is. That is what makes me love this watch, even though sometimes I do think, okay, maybe it is too small, but that's kind of punk rock too, isn't it? Yeah, it's too small, who cares? F you, bro, I'm going to fist fight you now. I'm not going to fist fight you. I got nothing to prove. You'd probably win, too. I wear small watches, come on. I can't win a fight. And on top of that, it puts a smile on my face, and I say it over and over again. That is why I wear any of these watches. Because they make me smile, they may remind me of simpler times, they may be aspirational, they may remind me of some hard work that I did. I don't know why. This watch reminds me of getting into trouble, over summer while I was in high school. I didn't wear fancy watches like this in high school. I don't think I even wore a watch most of high school. But it reminds me of getting some firecrackers, going and blowing stuff up, skating around town, walking to Blockbuster, getting some tacos from Jack in the Box. Yes, Jack in the Box used to sell tacos. This watch wasn't around at that time, and I certainly wouldn't have been able to afford it back then. But it reminds me of that, and that's enough. So there you go. That is my wearing experience with the Tissot PRX 35mm. If you own the 35 or the 40mm, I would love to know what your experience has been. What have you loved about it? What have you disliked about it? What would you change? Maybe, fingers crossed, they'll put out a 37.5mm. Because although I do think this does work, maybe sometimes it is a bit small. I won't admit it. And I won't send back the ovaries that I now officially have because I wear this. Some people are ridiculous. Oh, that's a girl's watch. Shut up. Who cares? All right, that is it. Thank you so much for watching. I will talk to you later. If you enjoyed the video, thumbs up, hate it, a thumbs down. If you love the channel, subscribe. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye. Whoa. Boop.